Ready to make a spoil board for your Masuter Pro? Then keep watching. Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of James Dean Designs. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button in the corner to get all the latest tips, tricks, tutorials and reviews. It literally takes a second and is right there. Now in today's episode we are making a spoil board for the FoxAlien Masuter Pro. Now for anyone that doesn't know, the difference between the standard MDF beds and an MDF spoil board is basically a spoil board is replaceable. If you cut into it, damage it, you can easily make another one. We also do something called surfacing, which is where we make sure the x-axis is parallel to everything that we are machining, ultimately giving us better results at the end. Now everything we are doing in today's episode is with the standard 60 watt spindle that comes with the Masuter Pro. If you have already upgraded to something like a Makita, then listen out for the commentary throughout the video about some of the differences, but crucially it's the first file that we're using because there is an offset between the two routers. Now all the files used in today's video can be found in the description area below this video. Do check it out, there is lots of useful links down there for you to download everything that we are using today. So let's get stuck in and start producing that spoil board. To achieve the best results, consider adding some support underneath the bed of the Masuter Pro. It is known to have a little bit of flex in it, so any minimising of that flex will get you much better results before you start machining the spoil board. So we begin by drawing a line 40mm in from the front end of the bed or the frame. This will act as a guide for when we place the piece of MDF on top. Next you'll want to pre-cut a piece of MDF to 400mm square or 15 3/4 inch. Now this is 1/4 inch thick, so 6mm MDF. The reason it is less than the size of the bed is because later on we will surface this piece of MDF to make sure everything is parallel. So we need to keep it within the constraints of the machine or within the working area, or that won't complete successfully. So once we've got the piece of MDF cut down, what we also want to do is put a centre line on the front and a centre line on the back, and this will help us align it with the joint in the bed of the machine itself. What we're then going to do is apply some blue tape with some Starbond or CA glue, and then we're going to basically glue this down like a sandwich together to hold it in place before we start machining it. So with the board stuck down, you can go around and clean up some of the blue tape if you want to. But the next two steps we're about to do is we're going to home the machine, which by default on this one will return it to the bottom left hand corner and effectively set everything to 0, 0, 0. We're then going to navigate the spindle over to this very corner where we're going to start the actual job. At which point we'll take a note of the coordinates from the position that it moved from home in the machine to where we want the job to start. The reason this is important is we need to run two jobs from the exact same spot. One to machine the holes and then a second one later to surface the actual board. So you may hear the machine on in the background. Now we're doing this in UGS. You can do the same in Candle or OpenBuild or whatever is your preferred software. So the first thing we're going to do is connect the machine. We're then going to come down to unlock to allow us to navigate the machine about. As I said earlier, the first process we want to actually run is the homing sequence. So we'll click that button now and let the machine do its thing. So what we can now see down here is we have some figures. Now at this moment, don't worry too much about what the figures say. We're going to jog over the head to sit on the bottom left hand corner of the piece of MDF. So we're going to navigate that around now and just make sure it gets as close to that bottom left hand corner as possible. Now I'm pretty happy with where that is. If you find that you are tripping the limit switches trying to get to that bottom left hand corner, just get it as close as you possibly can before it trips the limit switch. I have left enough play within the size of the holes to hopefully keep everything aligned. Now I've got the bit just touching at the top of the material. I've done this by eye. You can of course use a Z probe or use the paper method to do this. Ultimately it just needs to be touching the top of the material without applying too much pressure. So now we've done that, at this point we're going to click reset 0. Now what we can see down here is we've got a couple of coordinates. The 0, 0, 0s is basically where we want the job to start. The other important coordinate is this -375, -379 and -44.20. So these are the reference codes for where it is starting the job in relation to the homing sequence that we just did. Now at this point I would suggest making a note of those or taking a photograph of it. because ultimately we'll need to refer back to them later when we're doing the surfacing pass. Now at this point we can load our job in. So we're going to come up and we're going to open. I'm just going to find the file that I'm after. Now if you are using a Makita, this is one of the times where you need to select the Makita labelled files in order to do the job. There is an offset between the Spoilboard, so the holes will look like they are in different positions, as I say, because of how much further the Makita sticks out. So with the job loaded in, what we can just about see here is we've got a series of holes, obviously cutting where the insert nuts are. Now the speeds I've set this at are fairly moderate, so it shouldn't cause anyone any issues, and obviously you can do this with the 60-watt spindle that comes pre-installed with the machine. So with that done, let's click play and get this job started. So as we can see, I was slightly off with my original drawing. So I'm just going to go and redesign this now, tweak it a little bit, and then do a second pass. Obviously when you come to download my file, everything will be correct. So that's all the holes machined, and they now line up after I corrected the drawing. That's the joys of me doing this. I make the mistakes, so the files will be perfect for when you're doing them. Now the next thing we need to do is fit a surfacing bit. So let's take a closer look at this first. So we have a couple of different parts in front of me here. Now your standard ER11 collet will come with a 1/8 insert which sits inside of the nut, obviously, that attaches to the bottom. This allows you to take 1/8 bits. Obviously they just slide in nice and easy like that. Now a surfacing bit will have a deeper shank, or a wider shank, sorry. Because it's a bigger bit, it needs the wider shank in order to basically keep it solid and steady, and these come in 1/4 inch shanks. So in order to fit this bit into that collet, you will need a 1/4 inch collet insert. Now I'll put links to all these different bits in the description area below. Also, with a surfacing bit, these can be known as bottom cleaning bits as well. You'll want one that is between 15mm and maybe up to 20mm. Now, a 1-inch surfacing bit is quite common. So if you are struggling to get one that is under 20mm or around 20mm, you can use a 1-inch bit, but just keep an eye on it as it's running. It is obviously putting more pressure on the spindle. It should be okay, but I'm just warning you for safety reasons. So what we'll do now is put the insert into the nut. We'll start to thread this up and in place, make sure that it's clicked in, and then we will fit the surfacing bit in as well. So with that now locked in place, we're going to jog the machine back to this bottom left hand corner to where the previous job started, and this is where those references to the coordinates become useful, because we can get in the exact same starting position. Now the surfacing pass is going to skim the top of this material and take 0.2mm off it, and what you will start to see is some places it will touch the material, other places it will not, and we need to do this pass several times until it has covered the whole board. Now the easiest way to detect this is literally take a pencil and scribble all over your work surface. Put pencil marks pretty much everywhere to every single edge. Now as it skims over this, obviously when it touches the board it will take the pencil off. So if you've done a first pass and you can still see bits of pencil, we'll need to then lower the machine down 0.2mm and start another pass again. Now this will kick off a lot of dust because you are lightly skimming the surface. So just make sure that you are in a well ventilated area or using a vacuum or something to minimise the amount of dust this is going to generate. But let's move this back over to the bottom left hand corner and start that surfacing pass. Now I forgot to record this clip before surfacing the board, but it still applies, so I'm recording it now to insert it into the video. So before you start surfacing, you need to make sure your bed is as parallel as possible to the x-axis. Now the reason this is important, we're only skimming at 0.2mm off the top every time we run this job. So let's say for example your bed is out of kilter by 1mm from front to back. That means it's going to take you 5 passes of this job in order to get the bed level. So we want to try and get it to within a certain tolerance, normally within about 0.2 to 0.4mm, certainly no more than 0.5 mm. Now the way we judge how this needs to be done is in your control software, whether that's Candle, UGS, whatever it is. Bring the spindle to the bottom left hand corner, lower the Z-axis down until the bit touches the top of the surface. At this point you'll want to click reset 0 and all of the figures should go then to 0. Lift it up slightly, take it back to the back corner. Lower it back down at this point and you will see a discrepancy in the number. It will either be a plus or a minus value. If it is more than, as I say, 0.4 millimeters, it means that something is inclined or declining in the board. And then do the same over here and in each corner. Make a note of all the differences between the four corners. Now, once you've done that, you will have an idea of whether your bed is tilting forwards, back, left or right. And what you need to do is to try and counteract this. The edges along the spoil board, as it is at the moment, you've got a few Allen bolts. Slacken those off. And you can either put things like little washers in between to shimmy it up, little bits of tin foil or even cardboard. And as I say, you want to try and get this as good as possible within about 0.2 to 0.4 millimeters. Otherwise, you're going to do lots of passes in order to level the bed out. So what I've now done is rehomed the machine and then repositioned it to the exact same coordinates we had earlier on for the X and the Y axis. Now the bit obviously is different than the 1/8 bit, it is a different length, so therefore this coordinate down the bottom will be slightly different. This is normal. Obviously if you're changing different bits with different size, your Z depth will be slightly different. However, this is now set up to just be touching the surface, and we've clicked reset 0. As we can see, everything has now gone back to 0, 0, 0. Next thing we'll do is load in the surfacing code. Again, at this time, if you are using a Makita, select the Makita labeled surfacing file, because as I say, there are some differences between the 60-watt spindle and the Makita. So with the file loaded in and all the coordinates set to 0, let's start this job. So we finished surfacing the board. It did take a couple of passes to get rid of all the pencil marks. If you have to do the same and one pass doesn't do it, when it returns back to the beginning, click return to 0 and it will lower it down to the bed. Then lower it down by 0.2 millimeters, it's only a little bit, and click reset 0 again, then start the job off and it will go and do the same pass. Now one thing I should point out is from the original screen you saw where this should have spiraled out from the middle, I did change the design. Now it will do it slightly different and basically go left to right. So when you download the files, there will be a slight difference, but this is beneficial to you, and as I say, that's why I corrected the design. So now this has been surfaced and is parallel with the X-axis. The next thing we need to do is tram the spindle in. Now ultimately when you do yours, you may see some faint lines going left to right. Now luckily mine have not come out too bad, I can hardly feel anything. But if you do have these lines going across your board, this is what's known as tramming, and we're basically going to tram the spindle in now. What we effectively do is we bring in a little jig like this and we're going to fix it into the spindle. Now as we rotate this around left to right, it will magnify any discrepancies in the spindle in terms of it being perpendicular. So for example, if it's leaning more to the left than the right, it will show up as we're spinning it round. So let me drop this into the spindle now and I'll show you exactly what I'm on about. So this is a very cheap tramming jig that I've 3D printed and just put an old bit into the end, and this will add as our indicator when we're scraping along the board. Now there are more expensive ones of these available. You can buy them off Amazon, and you can get ones with dial indicators on the end if you really want to be extremely precise. Now if you don't have a tramming jig, we can still achieve the same in an easy, cheaper way. Take two Allen keys. One is a 6mm, this will fit in your 1/4-inch collet insert, and then just take another one, zip tie them together and you will get that same shape, and ultimately it does exactly the same job as the tramming jig. Now we basically just slot this into the spindle. Make sure that is in there pretty tight. Now the purpose of this is we're basically magnifying any discrepancies in the spindle, as I said earlier. So if it's leaning one way or another, this will show as we rotate it round front to back. So what we're going to do now is lower the spindle down slowly until the bit touches the board. There we are. So the microphone might not pick this up, but as we come round to the front we can just hear it scraping. So what that basically means is it's touching this front corner. Now if I rotate it round past that, it gets tighter and tighter. If I rotate it back the other way, it is a bigger gap at the back, and bring it back this side and it should touch around here. There we are. So basically what this means is the spindle is leaning forward. That's why it's touching at this front end and not the back end. So rotate it again, round again, touches there, and back again, and it touches there. So effectively it is leaning dead center to the front. So the likelihood of this being the case is because most of the weight is on the front of the Z axis assembly, and therefore it is pulling it forward. So we now need to counteract that. What I'm going to do, you do have a couple of options. You can either start to adjust the spindle itself and this setup by moving the bracket in or out, but to begin with I want to try and take some of the twist out of the actual X-axis gantry itself. So what I'm going to do is release the 2 bolts on either side of the X-axis gantry, and this should give me a small amount of play to tilt it backwards and forth. So what I'm going to do is release one more than the other just to allow it to tilt. So I'm going to release the top one by maybe a full turn and the bottom one by half a turn, and I'll do this on both sides. So I've just slackened the bolts up at both ends, and hopefully what we can see now is this little bit of play with the X-axis just moving a fraction back and forward. So if I tilt this back to try and take the lean out of it, and then I'm just going to tighten everything back up. So we're nearly there. We've just taken it out of the front now, but as I revolve it round I can just hear it catching on this left hand side. So what we're going to do now is adjust the holder and try and take the twist out of this slightly. So we're just going to slacken a couple of the bolts off and then just tweak it slightly. This is only a little bit, but the more time and accuracy you can spend doing this, the better results you're going to get from using the spindle. So it's taken a bit of messing about with, but what we should hopefully hear now is it's touching all the way around nice and evenly. There we are. So we know this is much better trammed in now, and what it means is everything is going to be perfectly level and perpendicular, giving us nice, smooth, level results. Now if you do have exaggerated tram lines on your bed and you can really feel them, now you've started to tram the spindle in, what you can do is drop the surfacing bit back in and do another pass, and you should get much better results. As I say, it will take a bit of time to really dial this in. You may have to do it several times, but in theory you should only have to do it once, and then once you've got all the hard work out the way, the results that you're going to get are going to be much better, especially when using bigger bits or doing larger surface areas. And just to show you, the same principle applies no matter whether it's a spindle or a router. You tram it in correctly, and then that completes the final phase of setting your spoil board up. So that's your spoil board done, and you now have a parallel surface to machine off in relation to your X-axis gantry, getting you more consistent results whenever you are producing work. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please make sure you subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Thank you all for watching. Final thanks as always goes to my patrons. If you want to get involved, check out the links in the description area below. You get early access to videos, priority help with any issues, and the occasional giveaway as well, so it is worth checking it out. Thank you all, and I will see you on the next episode.